The new planning system puts this emphasis on strategic planning as the basis for planning outcomes to streamline DAs. Now, Evan Jones is going to start the discussion by giving us an update on the policy thinking behind that. He's providing expert advice on the strategic planning components of the white paper, and you should know that he has extensive experience in strategic planning across Australia in both the private sector and the public sector. So he's going to talk to us about that, in essence, how all these plans from a regional level down to a local level nest together, which is a great word, which is his. And then Gary's going to bring us some experience from the recent reforms in Queensland about how you put some safeguards in place when you streamline development in this way. So, Evan, if you could stand up and start for us, where there's a range of questions we're going to try and answer, but just talk us through how those plans will nest together. How do you see that happening?
Sure. All hear me? I want to start at kind of the beginning in order to explain this. And the first is, and the Minister said it, that the Green Paper has a clear direction to rebalance strategic planning or the planning system towards strategic planning so that the future of our communities, our cities and the whole of the state isn't determined DA by DA and slugging it out in the field. It's to get it into the strategic realm so we can have intelligent debate, decision, consultation at that higher level to set a context for those plans and those things to happen. At the moment, we've got the worst of all worlds. We try and get city interests locked in locally and we get local interests mixed up, and I can hear the absolute anger and frustration in the room around those kind of systems. And I've worked across Australia and in other places this is a much more civilised conversation because there's been much less of that tension. Why do we strategic plan? Very simply, there's a whole range of interests from development interests to green interests, and we need to understand from dialogue with the community, the stakeholders, the experts, where that balance point lies, what we need to protect, where we need to develop. We need to coordinate transport in all places, Sydney, guys. We need to coordinate transport with infrastructure, with urban growth. We need to define no-go areas. We need to define go areas, and we need to get that agreed with the community. But at its heart, we've got a kind of a basic problem, and no one in the world has got this right. No one. We've had a look across the world. No one's got it exactly right. As the Minister said, we're going to put our toe in the water with a system that gives a fulcrum point for the balance for all those interests to happen. And that is that we see in the system, as proposed in the Green Paper, that there are statewide interests in state planning policies. They don't need to be DA policies. They need to set the clear principles, as was described over here, for what we're trying to achieve for the environment, for the economy and for the community, and where those balance points lie. And those principles need to go across all plans in New South Wales, whether they're at city level, regional level out in the country, or right down to local neighbourhood level. So the first thing is to unclutter the New South Wales planning policies, make them clear, make them high-level guidance, and embed the way in which those policies will be carried out in the various layers of the plans. Why do we need various layers of plans? Well, there are city interests. City interests are about making sure there's an adequate supply of affordable housing, the most basic need for people to have. It also needs to make sure that our precious environment is guarded and so forth. So there are citywide interests, but planning does a unique thing. It kind of gets right down to the grassroots and it says, we're going to protect this neighbourhood amenity and I'm going to protect overlooking from my neighbour. There's a very complex set of interactions to get from that very high level thing and competing interests right down. And so this is a toe in the water that we see as the panel making some suggestions to the Minister. This is not decided, this is our view of how something could work. So if we get those high level state planning policies to set that overall guidance, get out of the detail and push that detail where it's appropriate. So, and where it's appropriate is then in regional growth plans, and the regional growth plans aren't meant to be specific, the state saying you shall develop all of this everywhere here and in all those places, and that's been a great jack-up on regional plans across the planet, that you can't have a centralist view on everything. But you have to have a state view on some things. You have to have a state view on maximising the new billions of dollars of infrastructure that the state's spending. It would be ridiculous to spend that infrastructure and not consider its implications for what will happen with growth and what will happen with economic development. So the regional plans, the regional growth plans, are the moderation point for that. They set out large-scale transport infrastructure systems, establish region-wide housing and employment targets in a big conversation with the community about what they are, but to step off from being directive that every neighbourhood shall look like this because we have this target. Just pushing out those targets to understand that it's the state's responsibility to supply housing. And of course, protecting and considering the natural resource and ecosystems. So the big thing that needs to do the hard work, I'm sorry, taking a minute or two to do this because it's a bit complicated, is the strategic, at the sub-regional delivery plan level. So the idea is to set up new regional planning boards, and we'll have a conversation about what their constitution should be, how many community, how many stakeholders, what is their constitution, and how they work with the community, what their boundaries are, to set that discussion between the state and the overall big growth stuff for regions and local plans. So councils working together with the state and the community to decide those things. They need to be linked to growth infrastructure plans because we need to see what infrastructure is needed at that level. And we need to make sure there's cumulative impacts and market feasibility to understand whether those plans work. So the areas of sub-regional importance, picking out then the key growth and no-go areas in particular regions. And then we get out of the detail because then it's local government. And local government land use plans, frankly, some of them are just so far out of date, it's embarrassing. And don't serve either the council, the community or anyone. So we do need a culture of linking those local plans into the sub-regional plans. The council doing its full community consultation with its neighbourhoods as suggested or by whichever methods they see fit. And then providing that justification for the development controls that go. So each zone, imagine this for the first time, having an intention statement so that when you're looking at a development application, you know why you're looking at it, not just, oh, I'm applying with a plot ratio, with a setback, I'm doing this because this area needs to grow because we've got some infrastructure here, it's the key town centre for this area, and therefore we're going to have development there. So I think the final thing to say about this in this summary form is that a nest of plans, as I call them, because they've got different roles with different stakeholders, all engaging up and down, need to talk to each other. So we need to have similar things and understandings from regional plans to sub-regional plans to local plans, so you get a line of sight across what you're doing and why you're doing it when you arrive there. And so the concept then is, in conclusion, to produce an additional layer of planning to hand down some power from the state into sub-regional levels, get those boards open, get them fully consultative with the community to set the vision for those areas, then an evidence-based system to look at the plans and the systems and why, and then evidence-based once those plans are done as to the cumulative impacts and the market impacts of them to make sure they work. And they just pick out the key areas in those sub-regions, and then the council looks at those plans for guidance in doing their own plans with their own communities.
Thanks very much for that, Evan, and I'll invite you back. We have now several questions, some of which are just indicative that I'd like to get a sense from the audience of. Just very quickly, question number one, do you support this strategic shift, the shift to strategic planning to streamline the development process? So I'm just going to ask for a quick answer on this and a quick answer on the next question so we can dig into questions where we want detailed feedback. So just vote now on that one if you would. All right. You're anticipating question 3. It's an excellent question. I'll come back to you, sir, if you would. It's a great question, and we've anticipated that. Thank goodness. All right, so can we see the results of that one? All right. So we're showing you raw numbers now in response to questions about statistics. We're showing you raw numbers. 255 people, yes. 30 people, no. If we can then go to the next question, again, just an indicative question. Is this proposal for levels of plans, as Evan says, nests of plans, the New South Wales planning policies, regional growth plans, sub-regional delivery plans, and then down to the local land use plan? Is this the right approach for New South Wales? Just give us your thoughts there. And again, the next question, we're going to get into some real detail and feedback. Yes, if you would vote on that one, that would be great. Yes, there is input in the next question, I assure you. All right. Just give your best answer, if you would, to that question, because I think you'll see the next question and the one after provide the opportunity for really rich feedback. All right, can we see the answers to that one, Paul? Terrific. So 253 are yes on this idea of nested plans through to 48 down to no. Now, the next question, if we can have this on the screen. Questions 3 and 4 go together. You're going to be asked now to indicate, and you can pick as many as you like, of what needs to be in this sub-regional delivery plan, right? What needs to be in it? Do you like any of these? Do you like all of them? Do you like some of them? Keep in mind that the next question, we're going to open up these screens and ask you to indicate what you don't see in question 3. So what do you like from question 3? And don't worry if you don't like any of it or you think there's something left out, because question 4 will ask you to type in what's been left out. So have a look at these, this list of 9 first, please.
Are you suggesting that if you tick one of these, then these should be removed from the local government level and put into a sub-regional level? Is that what the suggestion is?
Evan, can you answer that one?
It's a very good question. So the idea about nesting, no, again, we're very open on this. The idea about nesting... Yeah, sorry, the question was, if you vote for this here, does it mean it's removed from the local government plan? Have I got that?
Yeah. So basically, are you stripping out the...
Are these being stripped out of the LEP to be put into a sub-regional plan? Is that what we're being asked to vote upon here?
Yeah. Now, the idea of these is that the sub-regional plans need to have a look at a full range of factors across the board, but the only things they do are pick very key areas for growth or very key areas for economic development. Key town centre, a key new growth area, maybe a key port or whatever. The other area, the vast majority, then this gives guidance to local plans.
All right. If I could, I'll come to you next, sir, but if I could get a vote on 1 through 9 here, and we'll give 1 more minute for the possibility of voting for those. Just have a good look at them. We might need to make more time. How are we going with those? Does anyone need more time to have a look at those? Has everyone had enough time? Just throw your hand up if you need a bit more time there. All right, let's look at the results of those if we can, Paul. All right. So they're all considered to be quite important. Now, this is important on question 4. Let's just open up the screens and please take the time now to enter in what other things that you think should be included in those sub-regional delivery plans. What else was not included in that list of 9 things? And while that screen's up, and those who want to can take the time, I'll just paraphrase that question if it's all right. We have a question. You'd like to ask the question? Go ahead.
What I wanted to ask is, how can you prevent... Hang on, we got a microphone for you.
Here we are.
A question I want to ask is, how can you prevent preconceived ideas starting at the top level and filtering down to the local plans without proper consideration? For example, we're looking at the first one now, housing supply. Now, the Minister and his entourage went and visited various jurisdictions in the United States, Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland. And all these particular jurisdictions have high-density policies, and it's obvious throughout the world that high-density policies cause high housing cost and unaffordable housing. So what we need to do is to ensure that at the beginning is a completely open slate and open discussion, so that such preconceived ideas aren't injected into the whole system, which then makes a mockery of the whole thing.
All right. Evan, do you want to talk to that?
I'm happy to, but I note, sir, you have your own preconceived idea.
Well, I'll try to look at the evidence.
No, I'm not debating you. I just note that we all have a position on this, and you have a particular one as well.
Yeah. Can we have the microphone runners at the front of the room and staying at the front of the room if we can? Thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
know this gentleman has been trying to make a comment for some
Yeah.
time, so thank you for your patience, sir.
James Ryan, Nature Conservation Council. I'm just wondering, I thought I heard Mr Evans indicate that his view of the sub-regional plans was that commercial development and infrastructure and possibly other urban development would be determined by the sub-regional plans, but all the other elements would provide, only guidance would be provided to local environment plans. So am I correct in understanding that the view you've put is that sub-regional plans provide a guarantee for development but leave the environment at the mercy of different local environment plans?
I can answer that for him. The answer is absolutely not. Environment's going to be protected and identified, because that's part of me as I get the ministerial feed on that one, and the environment is definitely up there. One of the words that was said to me when we were in the US was the land speaks first, and I'm very keen on that. So no, that's not going to happen one way or the other.
And Minister, I think I recall saying that it was the areas of environment and natural resources to be protected and the areas of commercial and so on.
The next question, and
Sorry, I haven't finished, I haven't answered Mr.
Sub-regional plans and sub-regional planning panels, are they electable and are they accountable?
Good question. Are they electable and are... Yes.
Yeah,
It's a great question.
I understand, and the answer is that has not been decided. There's an open question coming up in
Yes.
a moment, which is exactly about that. What's the constitution? How should they be made?
Yes. All right. In fact, you have anticipated the next question. And the next question is very significant. In relation to who makes decisions, this is exactly to the gentleman's point, on the sub-regional delivery plan, which of the following models do you support? And if you have a look at the... No? That's not the question.
Now, I think we should... They've got a couple of...
We've got them out of order. The question, if I can get you to jump up, Evan, the question relates to... So right now the state governments makes the decision. If you want to do partnerships, how do you do partnerships? And there are a number of options that we're going to present. Do you have a board of state and local government members and stakeholders? Do you have a board of state, local government, stakeholders and community representatives? The third option is, do you have a board of all local government mayors in the sub-region? And the fourth option is, do you have a mix of elected and senior officials from state and local government? And once again, if you have a better idea, a different idea or a comment, we'll make time for that. But if you just talk very briefly to those four possibilities that hopefully will go up on the screen.
Soon.
They are.
As I said, we're open on these models. We've certainly been having some lively discussions ourselves. The first idea was a board of state and local government members and key stakeholders. And the idea of that is the state has an interest, local government obviously has an interest, key stakeholders in sub-regions will have an interest.
And who would they be?
And that's the question.
Community groups, environment groups.
Environment groups. So there'd need to be a method, which is, I think, where the question was leading to.
Yes.
And what's the method of appointment of them? But we're trying to get the principles of who should be on them.
All right.
And then we need to also discuss the method by which they are appointed. The second option is a board of state, local government and also community representation, the idea of either community elections or some way of appointing the community onto these boards. South East Queensland, where Gary's been working, I've done some work up there, on behalf of local government, has what they call a council of mayors. So it's a local board of mayors in the region representing those interests. State government comes along and discusses, but the council of mayors makes the decisions. And the other one is a mix of elected and senior officials from state and local government, which is sort of a technical approach to the problem.
All right. Well, we're hoping to get that question up onto the screen. I can see they're working away hard. Can we get that question onto the screen? And maybe we'll just make some time for table discussions at this point to try and flesh out those. And if you don't see an answer that you like, we will open the little devices up straight after this and you can include another option. So have a chat amongst yourselves there.
Planning panels and PACs, there's a majority of the state government stakeholders in these panels, and as somebody said earlier, the PAC's decisions have been appalling. The joint regional planning panels have been mixed.
It's a fair point. I add that to the commentary. It's a fair point.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you take the time to just have the conversations about what you feel is important, use the expertise of the folks on your table to enliven that debate. All right, Paul, if we could, we'll give people just another 30 seconds to look at that, because I do want to provide you with the opportunity to add your own ideas in the open screen of the device. So just indicate numbers 1 through 4, and that is a choice. And let me know when you're ready to show those results, Paul. And then again, I will open the screen if you want to make a comment or you have another suggestion. All right, so there we go. So the majority support there is for state and local governments together, including the community. And the screens are now open if you have another idea or you have some reservations about that. Feel free to put those into the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience and forbearance. We're getting through a lot of material here, and I do thank you for participating in this. I'm now going to invite Gary Wright from Queensland. He's not afraid. They have very robust political debate in Queensland. He's very relaxed. He's going to talk to us about the recent reforms in Queensland and just talk about the policy thinking there, to dig in a little deeper about what happens when you establish these overarching planning instruments and how that works. So Gary's going to take his time, and then we'll have a specific question out of that, providing you with the opportunity to write your own feedback. Here we go.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting introduction when you said he's the fellow from Queensland. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing to some extent. What I'd like to say to you at the outset is just remind you what's on this front board here. What's on this front board is talking about a new planning system for New South Wales. It's probably encouraging you to think, looking through the windscreen, and not back through the rear vision mirror, which is one of those things that we so often get dragged into. We've done it really well in Queensland, so I can say that to you. What I'd like to say at the outset, and I'm here really to talk about the development assessment system, and that needs to be put in the correct context. Development assessment and the development assessment system is not your planning system. That is where the battlegrounds have been fought around planning for the last 25 years. That is why we have suffocated ourselves so well, not only in Queensland, but in other parts of the country around planning. Development assessment is a delivery platform. It delivers what your plan says. It delivers what you have said as part of your community engagement. It enables that which is consistent with what has been articulated well in your strategic planning framework to be delivered. We haven't done that at all well. We haven't talked about what planning sets out to achieve. So I make that really important point to you up front. Your development assessment system, alongside your infrastructure sequencing plan, are simply a delivery platform. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to deliver is that plan. We use the word strategic planning quite freely in forums like this. Really, at the end of the day, the strategic plan is the story. It's a story about where a community has come from, it's a story about where the community is now, and it's a story about where the community wants to go to in the future. And then your development assessment platform is the means by which you get there. It is not the plan in its own right. I'd also like to say to you that the success of a plan is probably measured by the amount of the stuff that's in the story that's achieved during a period of time, which then relates back to what Sarah was talking about earlier, about culture. So if there's a culture of enthusiasm generated by the achievement of the story, by both the community and by the planners involved, then I think you start to shift your planning system in a new direction. I just want to take you to one type of application process that we've used in Queensland. And you might say to me, how on earth can you do that? In Brisbane, for example, a 30-storey building in the middle of the CBD is a code assessable application. In Ipswich, where I was the town planner for many years, assessment of commercial buildings, residential buildings in the most significant heritage city in Queensland is code assessable applications. Why is it code assessable? It's code accessible because the thought, the engagement, the formulation of the plan, the issues that need to be considered in considering that as a part of the process have been taken account of in the plan-making process. What you have done as part of the code, you've put in place the regulations, you've put in place the requirements which enable the achievement of that part of the story in the plan-making process. Brisbane City Council and the Council of Mayors in South East Queensland that represent over 800,000 people recently did a survey on different types of applications. The survey basically was analysing how the application process has changed between the time they were submitted as part of the code framework and some of the impact assessment frameworks to that which was the materialisation of the approval at the end of the product. Over 85% did not change. Yet they had been subjected to over 100 days of assessment. So as the application came in and the application went out, it didn't change. So there's some logical questions being asked about what is the calibration and the logic behind the assessment process. So I've just thrown that into you. My comments were all about the assessment system, but I would like to remind you again, make sure your assessment system is a reflection of what the plan is delivering. It is not your planning system. Thank you.
If we could then have the question on the screen, and there's no answers to choose from here. In bringing in the code approach in New South Wales, what would give you confidence that it will succeed? It's a very open question. Do you want to just give a little bit of guidance about what we're looking for there, Gary?
I suppose I'd like you to think about the fact that in answering this question, you've already taken into account that the fact that in putting something into a code, in putting something into this type of application category, that you have in fact already looked at what the impacts might be, whether you consider them to be low, and that you're also already requiring particular regulatory compliance as part of the process. You're not shortcutting issues, what you're requiring is regulatory compliance. So in relation to that example I gave you of 30-storey buildings in Brisbane, it is quite clear what needs to accompany an application around that 30-storey building in terms of setback, in terms of podiums, in terms of activation of those buildings. If they don't meet those regulatory issues, then they start to fail the process. What happens then? And public space. It's a key issue when you're talking about buildings in the CB, so that you don't have blank concrete walls facing car parks, etc. So it is clearly articulated as to what the expectations are in relation to the built form of those buildings. It's also the case that if issues can't be regulated, then they don't fit the code accessible framework. It is also the case that if an application doesn't meet the code requirements, it automatically flicks up into an impact assessment process. But it's very, very few cases where they flick up because the proponent has done their research. The proponent has thought through all the issues so as not to prompt a flicking up into the next category.
So, I mean, one answer might be if you were coming from an environmental group, that what would give you confidence would be rigour up front in the strategic planning, that you would have to have that confidence, otherwise you wouldn't have confidence in the code.
We had major issues in southeast Queensland associated with koalas.
With what, I'm sorry?
With koalas.
Koalas,
And koala
right.
habitat areas. Quite frankly, those areas should not even be allocated for any form of development. So if you're doing your strategic planning up front, the issues associated with the environment, the issues associated with your wetlands, the issues associated with your dunes in the Sunshine Coast, they are not even up for consideration for development. They have been eliminated through the strategic planning process. They've been taken out during the storytelling with the community in terms of what's important. What has also happened, though, is those areas which have been allocated for residential development, you get on and develop them. You've taken out the other stuff. You don't leave the battleground for the DA by DA stage. You do that rigour up front. How many people can honestly say when they look at their planning schemes and their plan making that the correct resourcing and the correct effort has gone into that engagement, that consultation, that storytelling, that creating? Because it hasn't been done is why the battlegrounds have always been left to the DA forum.
All right, so the question, and we will go ahead, is what would give you confidence? Thinking about the code approach, what would give you confidence? So please take the time to put a considered reply into the little device and talk amongst your table if you feel the need.